This meeting's called to order. Welcome to the special meeting of the Board of Directors of the Vallecitos Water District for Wednesday, January 12th, 2022 at 5 p.m. at the district office. Okay, next up is the Pledge of Allegiance. Could I ask Director Boyd Hodgson to please lead us in the pledge?
Certainly. Pledge allegiance to the flag
of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Okay, next is roll call. Please indicate your presence. And we're all here. Additions to the agenda. I haven't received any requests for additions, so we'll move on to adopt the agenda for this meeting. I'll entertain a motion.
So moved.
Second.
Been moved by Director Boyd Hodgson, seconded by Director Hernandez. Please vote. And it's been approved unanimously. Next is public comment. Persons wishing to address a matter not on the agenda may be heard at this time. However, no action will be taken until the matter is placed on a future agenda in accordance with board policy. Public comments are limited to 3 minutes. Request to speak form is required to be submitted to the Executive Secretary prior to the start of the meeting if possible. Public comment should start by stating name, address, and topic. The board is not permitted during this time to enter into a dialogue with the speaker. I have one request to speak slip at this time for Ms. Gail Martin.
Can you hear me all right?
Yep.
Yes. Good morning, Board of Directors for the Water District. The district claims that they are absorbing increased costs. You would have to draw from reserves to do that. You have not been drawing from reserves. In fact, the reserve levels continue to rise. With such high reserves, why do you need to increase our rates? We have not $92.80 in reserves. We have $92 million in reserves. You've appropriately borrowed $28 million. But you still have a deficit in the developer funds. This deficit is 100% the obligation of the developers, but we ratepayers continue to pay for it. It looks like you have no intention of raising the developer fees. When you raise the water rates, you are making the ratepayers pay for the increased debt service, and you are making the ratepayers pay for the developer deficit. I would prefer to see a reduction in the rate increases. My second and last point is the public workshop on the January or on the February calendar for this year. Which date?
I don't have any information on that meeting.
We haven't set a date for that workshop yet.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, moving on to presentations. I'll hand it over to the general manager.
Yeah, thank you, President Elitharp. So tonight we get to recognize some of our staff for the work that they do, which is always fun. So I think we have an amazing team, and you guys hear me say it all the time, but it's really nice to hear when the industry agrees with us. So when we get awards from recognized industries, experts, that's a great thing. So every year, the California Water Environment Association recognizes outstanding accomplishments in environmental stewardship. And recently, we were honored by receiving 3 awards for them. And Chris Robbins is going to share with you some of the information that we provided to CWEA that they based their decision on who to make those award presentations to. So, Chris, why don't you take it away?
Thank you, General Manager Proem. So before she left, Don McDougall put in an effort with Ryan Morgan and submitted several awards for the district to receive Tertiary Plant of the Year Award, an Operator of the Year Award, and then a Community Engagement and Outreach Award. And she got a big assist, just like in sports, from Alicia, who, along with Dawn's paperwork submittal, Alicia created some videos, and I have a synopsis of those videos that I would like to share with the board. I'm gonna switch over to share screen. There's a little preamble at the beginning of the video. I'll probably pause it after that to make sure I've got the volume loud enough and just make sure everybody can hear it. But I would like to show this video. Is the sound okay for the boardroom?
It's not great, Chris.
Maybe I can just turn up the gain on mine. Is that better?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay, let's give this a go.
I wanted to be a part of the hazmat teams. I wanted to see the inner workings of emergency response and to know those procedures. We know what to do. We've trained. We've gone through scenarios, and just being able to act with that confidence, it's a great thing to be a part of that team. So board members, just a little quick reminder, the awards ceremony is on the 29th of the month, and CWA actually wants us to keep this a secret, and so until the 29th, we won't be doing any information outreach beyond what's going on in this boardroom today.
And I would add, so we get the recycled water plant of the year, the operator of the year, and the best use of social media for the year. That's a pretty good,
that's a
pretty
grand
good
slam.
year. That's pretty amazing. So congratulations to everybody, and not just the people that directly involved with the promotional aspects of it too. And so, as you know, Don retired in December. So what do you do with the operator of the year? Well, you promote him. So Matt is now took over Don's job. So
Oh, good.
yeah, it's a great team down there, and it's an amazing group.
Well, congratulations to all the staff that was involved, Chris, Ed with the O&M, and anyone in engineering that was involved as well. So thank you very much.
Yes, absolutely.
Good job, Alicia, too. I knew that she put that together. That was good. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Chris.
Yes, thank you very much. Okay, moving on to consent calendar. All matters listed under the consent calendar are expected to be routine and non-controversial, to be acted upon by the board by one motion. There'll be no separate discussion of these items unless a board member or a member of the public requested a particular item or items be removed from the consent calendar, in which case it will be considered separately under action items.
Move to approve consent calendar?
Second.
Then moved by Director Hernandez to approve, is seconded by Director Sinella. Please vote. And it passes unanimously. Okay, on to our action items. start with 2.1, water supply conditions update.
Yeah, I'll kick that off and turn it over to Chris. It seems like every month we have a significantly different story to present to the board on water supply conditions, and fortunately, the news is trending in a positive direction, so that's a good thing. So Chris will give us a brief presentation on how the most recent storms have impacted our water supply conditions. Chris, take it away.
Thank you, General Manager Proem. I'm hoping
Chris,
that I'm sharing my screen and I've got the water supply conditions
Hey, Chris, can
graphic
you hear
up.
me? Can you turn your volume down a little bit? You're super loud in here.
We love to hear you, Chris,
Yeah.
but
Thank you.
Is this a little better? I think I had the volume up for the.
Yeah, thank you.
That's good.
Okay, sounds good. And the water supply conditions slide is up on your screen?
It is.
So, we have had months of extreme drought, triggering water shortages up and down the state. Vallecitos itself is in a level 1 drought watch. But after these months of drought, heavy snow is accumulating in the Sierra Nevadas. 202 inches of snow, almost 17 feet, had fallen last month at the University of California, Berkeley's Central Sierra Snow Laboratory, which is at Donner Pass, east of Sacramento. And scientists had noted it was the snowiest December on record for the location and the third snowiest month overall. The Northern Sierra 8 Precipitation Index, I'm hoping you can see it's the blue line that's only partially completed, but we're well ahead of average for this specific time of year. The values are showing 158% of the new water year. Other good news from this is that the precipitation that's fallen in California during its current water year, which started on October 1st, it's more than we got in the previous full water year. So this is good news for us, and I'm happy to report this. Snowpack water content statewide is 150% of average. That's also good news. The storage is starting to percolate up. Lake Oroville is at 39% of capacity. San Luis Reservoir is 31%. And again, these two values are rising. And so previous reports, these numbers were falling and falling, but this is the last two recent times that these numbers are rising for us. This is good news. Colorado River, upper basin precipitation is 116%. That's good to hear as of the end of December. Lake Mead, 34%, Lake Powell, 28%. We still want to get some of that rain to trickle down into those reservoirs. The 3-month temperature outlook, I think this is the first time I've shown this where our location here is not showing higher than normal outlook. So that's also good news just for us locally. And precipitation, yeah, it shows a little bit less than for the San Diego region, but it's still better news. On January 4th, the State Water Resources Control Board voted 4-0 to approve new emergency rules that prohibit wasteful practices. It's the usual things, again, including hosing down driveways, sidewalks, and running sprinklers so that you get runoff, irrigating after rain. Fines for violators could reach $500, and enforcement would be up to local water agencies like ourselves, the district. The rules could take effect as soon as January 15th, and they're set to expire in 1 year. And just for clarification for the board, our VWD Ordinance 219 already prohibits almost all of these wasteful practices that the state board put into effect or are going to put into effect. This is some interesting data I wanted to share with the board. We submit figures to the state of California each month, and December 2021 showed that the estimated residential gallons per capita per day figure was 49.13, which is really low. What they really want to see is interior usage to be 55 gallons per day. We were below that. So that's really something. So we did receive a lot of rain during December. We're all aware of that, but this is still good news to share with the board. And in conclusion, we're still in level 1 drought. The state board adopted new drought restrictions, and our ordinance contains similar restrictions as what the State Water Resources Control Board put forth. And I'm open to take any questions.
All right, any questions?
Great news.
Thank you, Chris. All right, with that, we'll move on to item 2.2, construction contract award for Sage Canyon Tank refurbishment project.
All right, I'll kick that off and then I'll kick that off and then I'll turn it over to staff. So as the board knows, one of our primary focuses is on asset management. And that means we pay really close attention to the condition of our existing assets and take the steps necessary to ensure we maximize their lifespan at the lowest life cycle cost. And Ryan Morgan will be presenting on the work that we'll be performing to Sage Canyon water tank. So Ryan, take it away.
Thank you, General Manager Perome. Good evening, directors of the board. I'm privileged to present two exciting projects. They've been a long time coming. They're ready for contract award tonight. The first being Sage Canyon Tank refurbishment project. Sage Canyon Tank, as a background, is a 3.7 million gallon steel reservoir. It was built in the year 2000 on Stephanie Court in San Marcos. Sage Canyon Tank was last inspected in 2018. The existing interior epoxy coating system and exterior epoxy urethane paint system has deteriorated and requires full refurbishment. The project will remove and replace the existing lining and coating systems, including the internal coal tar enamel tank floor. Due to the age of the tank and level of deterioration, repairs and replacement or replacement of the steel rafters will be required. Equipment upgrades will also be necessary to meet current AWWA and Cal OSHA standards. The district awarded Harper and Associates Engineering a task order for design and bid phase services on March 22nd, 2021, with a fee of $17,425. On March 22nd, 2021, Harper also provided a proposal for construction inspection services, which totaled $62,620. District staff advertised the project in December and held a pre-bid meeting on site on December 16th. District staff received and opened bids on January 6th of this year from 4 contractors, with the following bid results shown on page 83 of your board packet. The low bid came in at $1.438 million, and then the following 3 bids came in a range between $1.643 million and $1.727 million. The engineer's estimate of probable construction cost was valued at $1.075 million, and that was in the spring of 2021, so almost a year ago now that estimate was provided. Staff and council completed the evaluation of qualifications and determined Advanced Industrial Services, Inc. was the lowest responsive and responsible bidder. Harper performed design and bid phase engineering services and will also provide inspection services during construction. Staff will provide construction management services and coordinate the refurbishment work with the district's water systems operations staff. The fiscal impact is broken down on page 84 of your board packet. The original project budget, which was estimated based on the original engineer's estimate, was $1.155 million. Construction contract low bid came in at $1.438 million. With the 7.5 contingency per ordinance 146, that's just over 100,000 at 107. And then we have design and bid phase services for Harper, construction phase inspection services for Harper, and likewise staff services during design, bid, and construction, including overhead, brings the grand total to $1,706,089, and that provides a budget deficit of $551,089. Recommendations for the Sage Canyon Tank refurbishment project are to, 1, increase the project budget by $551,089 to total $1,706,089. 2, authorize the general manager to execute a task order with Harper in the amount of $62,620 for construction phase inspection services. And lastly, to authorize the general manager to execute a construction contract with Advanced Industrial Services Incorporated in the amount of $1,438,180 for the Sage Canyon Tank Refurbishment Project, subject to the provisions of the contract. And with that, I'll be able to field any questions the board may have.
Okay, thanks, Ryan. Any questions? Go ahead, Director Boyd Hodgson.
Thank you, President Ellithorpe. Thanks for that presentation, Ryan. I have a question, not so much about the money, but I'm wondering, this cleaning out these tanks and refurbishing the inside and the outside of these tanks represents such an interesting opportunity for Vallecitos to showcase what we do. I wonder if it would be possible, as the work is going on, for folks to video some of the process inside while it's going on and possibly provide that to Chris's team so that perhaps another video can be made about this process. I imagine, people are curious about what these tanks look like on the inside and how they need to be maintained. I see it as an opportunity, and so I just wanted to throw that out there and float that idea.
We would definitely be able to accommodate Alicia and Chris Robbins' team on site. We do like to provide a before and after photo in the past of the condition of the corrosion inside the tanks and how sparkly, clean, and nice it looks when it's all done. So if we want to take that a step further and actually do some video production, certainly not opposed to that.
Yeah, Director Boyd Hodgson, thanks for bringing that up. We kind of have a standing understanding, Chris and I do, that let's take advantage of every opportunity we get. When we open something up that people normally can't see, let's go grab some footage.
Great, thank
And
you.
then find a way to share it with everybody, because I think it'll send a great message to the public when they see how clean
I think
this
it's
is.
a great idea, and most people have no concept of this kind of work, so
Yeah.
it'd be very helpful. I think. Good idea. Any other comments, questions?
One, what's the cost of replacement? Do we ever replace instead of repair? Is there
So yes, we do. With tanks, you try to avoid that, and
Yeah,
that's the
'cause
whole purpose really of asset management, to get it.
how old
early.
is this tank?
James, how old? James or Ryan, how old is the tank?
It was originally built in 2000.
The tank is approaching 25 years old, which is about the standard age when they will require refurbishment. The coatings and paint, interior lining and the exterior paint will wear in time. This is one of the district's larger steel reservoirs. And the cost of, steel has gone up. There's patching involved, there's welding involved, there's blasting and coating involved on a large steel surface. Replacement is not really needed as long as the district maintains its tanks and provides adequate refurbishment when it's needed.
Gotcha. And there's warranties for so many years on when a carper comes in and does what they're doing?
There is a 1-year materials and workmanship warranty from the contractor. We provide a 11-month warranty walk to catch any deficiencies that may have popped up in that time.
Gotcha. Thank you, Ryan.
Yeah, and I think that based on the bids that we received, it shows that the impacts of COVID go far beyond just public health. We're starting to feel it in a lot of the pricing for materials and services, and labor has gone through the roof. Everything's high.
So this is pretty typical of construction project bills.
We're seeing the creep.
In the last year or so.
President Ellithorpe?
Director Snow?
Yeah, I know this is pretty, am I on? I know it's a pretty routine preventative maintenance activity, but will there be any impacts to the neighborhood, surrounding neighborhoods while the tank is taken out of use?
Go ahead, Ron.
We'll provide notifications of the construction and the contractor coming on site. We'll provide advance notice to the neighborhood who is impacted by the construction.
Yeah,
Typically speaking,
not so much the construction, because I know that where this tank's location is a little bit isolated. I'm talking more about water service.
No, water service won't be cut off to the customers.
Okay.
Will not be cut off.
Okay, thank you.
All right, if there's no other comments or questions, I'll entertain a motion to move staff's recommendation.
So moved?
Second?
It's been moved by Director Sinella, seconded by Director Boyd Hodgson. If there's no further discussion, please vote. And it passes unanimously. Thank you, Ryan.
Thank you.
And item 2.3, if I may, President Eltharp, it's
Sure.
also Ryan, and involves another piece of critical infrastructure that needs attention. So Ryan, while you have the mic, take it away.
Thank you very much. The second project I'm here to discuss contract award for is the tertiary structural rehab and repairs project, which is going to occur at the Meadowlark Water Reclamation Facility, or just Meadowlark. Meadowlark has 6 existing concrete tertiary filter basins that process secondary effluent into recycled water, which the district ultimately sells to the city of Carlsbad and Olivenheim Municipal Water District. The tertiary treatment process was originally installed in 1981 with 3 filters, and then it was later expanded to 6 filters during the 2005 plant expansion project. The proposed tertiary structural rehab and repairs involves some tasks including replacement of the structural beams for the mixer plate and motors, tertiary basin number 2 expansion joint removal and replacement, blasting and coating tertiary basin number 2, repairing and sealing the existing pipe penetration in basin number 2, installing groove flexible couplings in basin 1, blasting and coating the secondary influent channels, and replacement of 6 manual butterfly valves. And lastly, the removal and replacement of 3-inch diameter stainless steel air pipeline. The rehabilitation and replacement improvements stem mostly from the equipment and materials of the original 1981 installation. Staff publicly advertised the project beginning in November of last year, and on December 2nd, staff conducted a pre-bid meeting with 5 general contractors on site. District staff received and opened 1 bid on December 16th from J.R. Felance Construction for $773,000. The project's engineer's estimate at the time of the fiscal year 21-22 budget planning was valued at $625,000. But this was before additional scope of work was included in the project during final design phase. Working with district operations staff requests, the installation of 6 new 18-inch diameter manual butterfly valves and 2 new 20-inch diameter groove flexible couplings were added to the project scope of work. This was after the budget planning cycle was approved by the board in June. These items totaled approximately $170,000, which includes the anticipated materials escalation, contractor overhead, and markup. Additional O&M requests for miscellaneous rehab, removals, and repairs as part of the maintenance schedule for Meadowlark were also added into the project scope of work during this final design phase. And the additional scope requests required additional final design detailing, specifications, staff coordination, project management, and administration. This process essentially deferred the advertisement of the project schedule by approximately 4 months of the bid. The updated engineer's estimate, including the extra scope of work, is valued at over $795,000. And although the district received only 1 bid, staff weighed all these factors and determined that the bid is considered competitive in the current local construction market climate. Staff and council completed the evaluation of qualifications and determined that Felance submitted a responsive and responsible bid. As needed consultant Black & Veatch assisted staff in the preparation of the plans. District staff self-performed project management, design detailing, and production of plans and specs. District staff will provide inspection services during construction and construction management. Harper and Associates engineers will be conducting the specialty inspections during construction. Fiscal impact is broken out on page 88 of your board packet. And with the total budget of $715,000 and the bid coming in at $773,000, adding up the additional items, including a 10% contingency, specialty services by Harper, design services by Black & Veatch and staff, including overhead and district furnished materials. The total project budget is up to $1,033,923, and this provides a budget deficit of $318,923 to the project. Staff's recommendation for Merck tertiary structural rehab and repairs is to, one, approve a project budget increase in the amount of $318,923, a total $1,033,923, and two, authorize the general manager to execute a construction contract with Phelons in the amount of $773,000, subject to the provisions of the contract. And with that, I will field any questions there may be from the board.
All right, thank you, Ryan. Any questions?
Did I hear, we only had one bid?
Yeah.
That's correct.
Is that normal?
Yeah, Ryan, did we determine any particular reason why we just got one bid?
You know, this project is a bit of a mishmash of a lot of different types of work, and we had 5 contractors come to the pre-bid meeting. We were anticipating receiving more than one bid. At the end of the day, Phelons is a very well-known general contractor, local to Escondido. They do a lot of treatment plant type work, and they can self-perform a lot of the scope of this contract. Whereas a lot of the other contractors who were at the pre-bid would have to do quite a bit of subcontracting out. And we believe that that was a differentiator for Phelons in this. And at the end of the day, the other contractors made a business decision to not bid, although we had hoped they would. But we still went over the review of the scope of work to determine that this price we feel is fair based on the scope creep that the project presented over time and final design with the additional O&M requests and the items I mentioned earlier with the additional couplings and valves, for instance. So that being the case, we do feel comfortable with, in this particular situation, with the one bid, although it is not something we typically like to see.
And did I hear Harper's name in there again?
Yes, Harper is on board for inspection services during construction, as this is a large portion of this project is coatings. Similar to the steel tank coatings, for this, it's going to be concrete coatings.
Gotcha. Same Harper is doing sage mending. Okay.
Yes, sir.
Hopefully they give us a break if they're getting 2 jobs.
Harper is a pleasure to work with.
Good.
All right, any other questions, comments, motions?
Move to approve.
Second?
It's been moved to approve staff recommendation by Director Hernandez. It's been seconded by Director Pennick. If there's no further discussion, please vote. And it passes unanimously. Thank you, Ryan. Okay, moving on to 2.4, discussion regarding in-person public meetings.
And I'll take that one, President Elitharp. So from March 18th of 2020 through October 20th of 2021, Vallecitos conducted all of its public meetings via Zoom in response to COVID. And this was allowed based on executive orders issued by the governor at the time. When the pertinent executive orders expired, agencies were required to comply with Assembly Bill 361, which is in place right now. And 361 requires that the governing body of a public agency, such as Vallecitos, take certain actions based on findings to continue meetings virtually. So at our meeting on October 21st of 2021, our board did not take action to continue virtual meetings, which meant that meetings were required to be held in person, which we've done for the last, I think, 3rd meeting now. So our meetings have been in person since that. But as the board knows, this latest COVID variant, Omicron, is surging through the population. It's everywhere. The latest news I heard reported that over 98% of all COVID positive cases are the Omicron variant. So it's dominating everything. In addition to increasing the vaccination rate, one of the best ways to prevent the spread of coronavirus is to minimize public contact. So that's what all the public health officials are espousing. Many agencies are returning to virtual meetings, including the City of San Marcos and the San Marcos Unified School District. They've all gone back to virtual. If our board wanted to return to virtual meetings, the majority of the board would need to make a finding. And the finding is that meeting in person would present an imminent risk to the health and safety of meeting attendees, including the public, staff, and board members themselves. And the board would need to take subsequent action every 30 days to continue to meet virtually. And you may recall from when we talked about this back in October. So if we were to continue to meet in person, like we're doing tonight, no action is required. We can just do nothing, we can pass on this item, and next meeting we'll be back in the board chambers. Our current rules do require that all persons attending public meetings wear facial coverings, except when they're actively speaking, regardless of vaccination status. It is my recommendation that we return to virtual meetings. This surge has hit us really hard from an operation perspective, and I think it would be show good leadership to go back to virtual. We've proven that it works. We know the technology works. We know how to handle it. And in the interest of everyone's public health, I think it's the best thing to do. And I would suggest that we revisit that decision if we were to go virtual back, probably in March or maybe early April. We'll watch the curve of COVID, particularly the Omicron variant, and see when it gets back to more manageable levels, we can reconsider meeting in public or in person.
So we would have to consider that
Every
30 days.
Every 30 days, right.
So we'll be back in February.
Right, I'm giving the board kind of an outlook, thinking maybe 2 to 3 months, but we would have to come back every 30 days and take that action to continue it for the next 30 days. And with that, I'll turn the item over to you, President Elitharp, and we're just looking, if the board is interested in going back to virtual, there's certain findings that need to be made by the majority of the board tonight.
Okay, well, I look forward to getting input from everybody, so.
My input is just whatever's best for the public, and since we usually have Ms. Martin as our main public at our meetings, I don't know if we can ask from the public, what do you prefer?
I always like to see you guys.
So your preference would be in person?
In person.
You don't have, okay, interesting.
Director Snow.
Yeah, while I do certainly respect and understand Ms. Martin and Director Pennick's question and thoughts, there's another aspect to this too that I think Glenn kind of touched on, was the continuity of operations. And water and wastewater services are so critical. And we've already been impacted, like everybody else, from this pandemic, that I just don't think that the risk is imminent. I think everybody knows that. It's widely been communicated through the press and the medical and scientific experts. But I just don't think at this point we should take that risk, and we should do everything we can as a board and a district to mitigate the risk and maintain our capability to operate and provide our customers water and wastewater services. So I'm supportive of going back to online meetings, with the understanding we do the same thing with EWO, because the EWO Encina board that I'm on, we never went back to in-person, but every 30 days we have to reevaluate that, have this conversation, and then make a decision. So it'll be a continuous evaluation. And I'd like to get back to in-person as quickly as we can, but right now I think it's prudent that we mitigate that risk to our staff, our customers, and our operations.
Thank you. Director Hernandez.
I'm afraid we're gonna have this virus or variant with us forever. I believe personally it's moved into the flu, and now everybody's getting the flu, and everybody's tagging it as the Omicron. I believe we're gonna, much like the flu, every year we're gonna get back into it. The newspapers are gonna have everybody's getting it, and we're gonna be back and forth. I personally think we are in a pretty safe environment here. I like meeting in person, and I would choose to stay meeting in person.
Okay, thank you. Director Boyd Hudson.
Thank you. We're not discussing anything other than the board meeting. We're not talking about operations, right? That is not impacted by our decision.
Right.
We're talking about us meeting as a board only.
Yeah, and committees. So
And committees.
Yeah, the action that the board takes applies to the committees as well, correct? Mr.
Yeah.
Gilpin? Yeah. But not to district staff operations.
Right, okay. I do think that we have to find a way to manage the health and safety of us, as well as, the folks that work here. I feel like we are fairly distant up here, but I also want to recognize that whenever we meet in person, it requires staff to come in who may not feel like they are safe. I think the conservative way to approach this is to go back virtual, but if the board majority wants to continue meeting in person, perhaps we can continue to find ways to make sure that staff is safe. That would be my ask.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, I appreciate that consideration, because whenever staff members come here, we go back and interact with other staff members minimally, but that risk just increases. And we just recently had to send about 15 of our folks home to be working virtually because of impacts of COVID.
Yeah, I would just say, for me, I could make either work for myself, but I want to defer to staff because you're really bearing the brunt of the effects of this operationally day to day. And I completely agree with Director Snell and Director Boyd Hudson. So
Yeah,
my desire would be to go back to virtual.
Yeah, reiterate, my recommendation is we go virtual.
So with that, you probably need a vote. I'll entertain a motion.
I'll move that our board and committee meetings be moved back to virtual, and with the required reconsideration and reconfirmation every 30 days.
Okay.
Second.
I have a motion by Director Snell and a second by Director Boyd Hudson to return to virtual meetings. Please vote.
Hang on, President
I think
Alford.
there's a finding you need to make, and I think it's a relatively low one, that state and local officials have imposed or recommended measures to promote social distancing. Though that finding exists, you're in the middle of a proclaimed state of emergency, but you as the board do need to make that finding.
Okay. So,
That you find.
Okay. Should we restate the motion to include that?
Restate it to include the finding that state and local officials have imposed and recommended measures to promote social distancing, and that you're within a proclaimed state of emergency.
As noted by council.
yeah,
As stated
noted,
by-
is that good enough? As noted by council? Okay.
Very good. Okay, if there's no further discussion, please vote.
My vote's not up.
Matthias, can you bring up the voting screen? Yep. Apologize.
Okay, looks like it passes 3-2. All right. Moving on.
All right, so item 2.5, our last, I'm sorry.
Selection of president and vice president.
Yeah, I'll take that, President Ellithorpe. So District Ordinance 216 provides guidance for the annual board reorganization. And what reorganization in our parlance means is that who's going to be president, who's going to be vice president. And it indicates that that should be done in December, and we did this in this past December. There is a provision in Ordinance 216, and it states, and I'll quote, "Each director shall have the opportunity to hold the office of president once during their first term, sorry. So the ordinance is silent regarding the office of vice president in this regard. It doesn't say that every board member shall have an opportunity to serve as vice president. So switching from the ordinance to practices, it's been the district's practice to rotate the offices of president and vice president annually, primarily based on the division each director represents. The board packet tonight includes the president and vice president assignments over the last 10 years, I believe. If the board were to continue its past practices of rotating in the order that we have been, it would result in a conflict with section 1.9B of ordinance 216. Doesn't occur now. This issue was raised by Director Boyd Hodgson at our last meeting on December 15th of 2021, and at that meeting, staff was directed to place an item on tonight's, or on a future board agenda, and that's why we're here tonight. So this item was discussed at the policy committee this past Monday, and I'd just like to inform the whole board, at this time, there is no conflict. We are not in a situation where we are in conflict with ordinance 216, but it's heading that way, right? If we keep our past practice, we will conflict with it, but there is some time. So if the specific provision of ordinance 216 is not changed by the board, which is an option, we could still comply with the ordinance by appointing directors Boyd Hodgson and Pennick as president in December of 2022 and December 2023, and not specifically in that order, but the two of them would be serving as president in those in December of each year. And basically, they would serve in basically the full year of 2023 and 2024. So with that background, I'd be happy to answer any questions. And again, is placed at Director Boyd Hodgson's request.
Yeah, I just want to clarify also the review and discussion of the ordinance 216 was to come to a future agenda as well.
Correct, and there was some, we did discuss that briefly at the policy committee meeting, but at the policy committee meeting, it was decided to focus on this aspect, and then at the next policy committee meeting, we'll go into greater depth on the entirety of ordinance 216,
Okay.
and then bring that back to the board.
Thanks for that clarification. All right, well, I'll open it up for discussion.
Okay, I'll start.
Okay.
So I appreciate the background, General Manager Pruitt, on the context. So to put some color around it, the policy or the ordinance states that each director will have the opportunity to serve as president within the first 4 years of their term. Director Pennock and I are the new board members. So the practice, the difference between a practice and an ordinance, my understanding is that practices are just sort of the historical traditions that the board has followed. They're not written down, they're not codified, they're just the traditions. And that makes sense typically, in any organization, in any board. The vice president then moves into the presidency. The way that we have set up our board this time around, if we follow the tradition, Director Hernandez, should he be reelected, moves into the presidency because that is the practice. However, if that happens, then Director Pennock or myself will not be able to serve as president as the ordinance stipulates. That's the reason why I brought it forward.
Okay. Director Hernandez.
We have bumped up against this on a number of occasions. And this same issue took place half a dozen years ago, where in fact, one of the board members brought this issue up as a policy and said, hey, I'm not going to be board member in my first year. So I was president, and I was asked if I could take it to the next year's president, would that individual step down? Very offended, to the point that within a month, that individual resigned, and then the problem was solved. I think, personally, we need to scrap this section of the ordinance completely and rewrite it so that it's a rotation. And if you happen to be in the rotation and within your first term, you don't become president, that's how it falls. The only difficulty there is, much like myself, I'm potentially going to be president next year. However, if I don't win my election this year, then it's a moot point. But I'm planning to win, so we're going to have to deal with this. And so making a provision that if you are a first-year board member, you cannot take the presidency, you go to the end of the line. That way we don't have to worry about this. I appreciate that for a new board member, you may not be able to serve as president in that first term, but by and large, in my 11 years on the board, we've never had a board member not win his next race. So I think it would be, and I certainly don't want to see this go into a popularity contest where we just say, okay, we're just going to vote the president in. Helix had that policy, and they had a gentleman who was president for years until he finally did not choose, or maybe even lost the election. But I think the rotation is a good way to do it. It just, we have to bite the bullet, and maybe you're not going to be president in your first term.
Well,
Thank you, Director Penna.
well, my understanding is the vice president does not play a role in becoming the president. The rotation is strictly with the president. So if I'm correct in seeing the rotation, regardless of the vice president, next year, based on the rotation, the president would be Director Boyd Hodgins, correct? And then the following year would be myself, based on the current rotation, regardless of who's vice president.
Well,
Is that,
based solely on rotation,
yes,
the past rotation,
Practice.
it would be in practice. So it would be next year, Director Hernandez would be president, and then Director Boyd Hodgson would be president, and then you would be president.
Okay.
That's the order of the next 3 years, if we
and
just
we're
simply
just
follow
talking just
practice.
president,
Right.
because the vice president doesn't play a role in that rotation.
Well, indirectly it does, because the vice president follows the same rotation. The vice president is a one-year
Becomes
lag
next
behind the
year's.
president in rotation. That's just how it has worked.
Gotcha. Okay,
But there's nothing, I will say, there's no ordinance that says the vice president shall become the president, or you have to be vice president the year before you're eligible. There's no linkage between the two in the ordinance.
right. No, I liked your analogy of the batting order. I mean, I just thought there was an order, it just goes whatever. And it didn't go 1 through 5, like you said, it went like 3, 4, 5, 1, 2, or whatever. And I'm good with keeping a rotation, whatever that rotation is, wherever that falls. As long as Tiffany gets a chance to be president, I'm fine with that. Because me, to be honest, how it works right now, it doesn't matter where it falls, but I would love for her to be president. And if it looks like that's the case next year, the following year, I mean, then I'm good with that.
Yeah, I would add that it would be bad form for us to knowingly violate the ordinance. And I think that's part of Director Boyd Hodgson's point. So if we wanted to follow the historical practices, then we should probably modify the ordinance so that we don't cause a conflict. Or we can do something different and keep the ordinance the same and change our practices. We can't continue to do both without conflicting with the ordinance.
Gotcha, well then let's do it.
I mean, I obviously have a conflict, right? I didn't realize until we were meeting in the policy committee that it would have been me that would be, according to the rotation, be the next president. I was actually advocating that Director Pennock be, be the next president. But I obviously have a bias. I don't, irrespective of whether it was me or not me, I appreciate that if we all had an opportunity as new board members to be the president, that we have different views that we can bring to the table. We get to shape the board. That's one of the reasons why we run for this office, because we have ideas. And that's part of the gratification of it. We get to implement our ideas, and we get to do that through policy and setting the agenda, and that's what the president does. I'm not in favor of changing the rules because we have a situation that is conflicting, that enables a conflict to continue. I like the idea of having each board member have the opportunity to be president. I think that seems fair.
But mathematically, it can't happen, right?
It can happen.
You have 5 board members, 4 years.
That's right. Each new board member. So even if there are 3 that are elected, if one of the new members that's newly elected in the 3-year cycle is the vice president, they can still be the president and it can all work out. The math still works.
That's why you're the doctor.
Well, no, I'm just.
No, I'm just saying, I was just thinking 5, 4, but I see what you're saying,
Yeah.
new board members.
In 1 year.
But has that ever, that's never happened. We're not all up for election the same year.
3 and 2.
Right. I see what you're saying.
If,
Each new
if you
board
had
member.
resignations and appointed board members, it could happen, but
Okay,
normally it wouldn't happen.
Makes sense.
So, I think the recommendation that came out of the policy committee is that we made no changes to the ordinance. We just follow the ordinance.
Could I just wanted to raise a legal point, because the ordinance, we're focused on the president now, but the last time we had this debate, it was relative to the appointment of the person to the water authority. And the ordinance also has a provision where everybody has the opportunities to hold the position on Encina or the water authority during their first term on the board, 4-year term on the board. The water authority has essentially a 3-year term of the office.
6 years.
6 years, so your policy is always in conflict with that position, and it's come up was it last year or the year before, I think?
Right.
I think when Craig was gonna take over for Betty. So, there's always been a conflict with the ordinance. I mean, I just advocate that you relook at the whole ordinance and address it. And if you wanna leave certain provisions the way they are, that's fine, but there are some that are just internally in conflict with how it works, particularly with the water authority.
I would just say, as a suggestion, since we're gonna be reviewing ordinance 216 and there currently isn't a conflict, we have some time. It may be once we're done and agree upon a new ordinance 216, we may not be in conflict with what we're doing, so. I don't think we have to decide anything tonight. I think, let's work through 216 when it comes to the board and see where that falls. I agree strongly with council. My bigger problem is the Encina and CWA appointments. I don't think that serves the best interest of the ratepayers, switching that out every year just so each person can have a shot at it in their first term. It's, the Encina appointment, that takes a good year to 2 years, and particularly with this pandemic, I think Director Sinella will agree that it's tough to get up to speed in normal situations, but with this pandemic, it's made it extra hard. So, that's a good 2-year process right now, getting up to speed just there. The County Water Authority, I've been in this industry 35 years, and it's gonna take me another year just to get up to speed. And in the best of circumstances, I haven't attended a live board meeting yet, and it's the same with Mike and Encina.
Yeah.
So I've got a huge problem with that part of ordinance 216, and I would just suggest we wait and deal with that first before we decide this issue by itself. So I'd love to hear from Director Sinella.
Yeah, thank you. So the language that we're discussing tonight is in there because I proposed it, and I proposed it as a new board member. I do, and hearing Mr. Gilpin kind of explain, especially as it pertains to Water Authority and Encina, it's one of those, it's a learning opportunity as a new board member. Rewind 5-6 years ago when we did this, that it doesn't make a whole lot of sense with those two particular appointments especially. However, I still believe, and I agree with Director Boyd Hodgson regarding her thoughts about this, the chairman position, the president position, that the voters voted each of the individual board members in because they believed in their vision for the district. And I feel like we owe it to the voters to allow their person that they voted for to be president of the board at least once during that first term. And so while I agree with Director Ellertharp that we really just need to go ahead and revamp the entire ordinance and take a holistic look at it, I will be an advocate that we keep that one piece of it in there in some way, shape, or form. I would much rather get rid of or do away with the practice. I mean, it's a practice. And I think we're kind of guilty of our own desire to be as fair as we possibly can, because that's really what the intent of that practice was, to be fair, not to have any sort of debate or argument about who's going to be president. It would just be by practice, a rotation. But in reality, you know, the county supervisors, they don't do it by rotation. The school board doesn't do it by rotation. The vice mayor position within the city, which is not elected, is not a rotation. And so and so as we go through this reevaluation of our ordinance, we're pretty well known to benchmark almost everything that we're considering. I would like to benchmark other water agencies and other local municipalities and the county board of supervisors. How do they handle it? Because I think that's the unique aspect of our practice right now, is that, like I said earlier, we're a victim of our own desire to be fair. And it's causing a little bit of a conflict, and it's an unattended conflict, but it's also, it's a bit of an anomaly, because in the time that I've been on the board, and Jim, maybe you've had a few more years than me, so maybe you've seen some conflict around this. The practice has worked really well, and this is the first time that it's put the ordinance in putting us in a position where we're gonna have a conflict with the ordinance and ourselves. And so, it's time to reevaluate the practice as well, I think. And we can maybe address the practice in the revision of the ordinance, so. So I agree with it, basically both Director Ellertharp, your direction, although it's different than Director Boyd Hodgson, I agree with both of you. And I just want to also reiterate that it's only a practice that the vice president goes into, through the rotation, goes into the president. So that's not necessary. So we could keep, I'm saying this because if we can keep the language in there about the board president every board member having an opportunity to serve as president once during their term, we can keep that. It doesn't necessarily mean they have to have an opportunity to be vice president. I view the role of vice president completely different. The role of vice president, having served in it a couple times now, really, it babysits the seat when the president cannot be there. Maybe in very, very far and few between opportunities might represent the president at an event that the president can't be at. That hasn't happened in the 2+ years that I've been vice president. The president's completely different. And like Director Boyd Hodgson said, they have a little bit more influence on the agenda. They have a little bit more influence on the direction of the board meetings. And I think that's very important to give the voters their opportunity to have the candidate that they voted for to be president at least once during their 4-year term.
Mike, I don't see how, forget the vice president, just the very rotation still puts us in a conflict, because I believe, rotation-wise, I am the next rotating president. And that still bumps either Director Boyd Hodgson or Director Pennick off the rotation in their first term. So I do think we need to take a look at that, as well as the whole ordinance. And I think we do need, whether it's a task force or put it back to the policy and legal and policy committee and begin to hack this out. But we have a conflict in a number of areas, and I think we need to resolve it.
Director Boyd Hodgson.
So I wonder if we can just do a thought experiment and walk down the road. Let's say the policy, the ordinance is not changed. And we're sitting here and it is December of this year. We're all still board members. And all of a sudden we have to choose a president. How does that go? What does that look like?
Choose a who?
A president.
I can give you based off of my understanding of the ordinance and the way that it was proposed and the intent when I proposed that language. The competition, for lack of a better way to put it, for president would be between Director Boyd Hodgson and Director Pennick. And we would probably have, first off, ask who's interested of the two of you. If you were both interested, then maybe we'd have a quick little, interview of like, hey, tell us what you'd like to do, and then we would vote one of you in. But you two would be the only two that would be considered if we get to that point. in my opinion. That's one board member's interpretation of the ordinance, but,
Knowing that the following year, the other one would be.
and then the other one would be
What-
automatic
Is that because Director Pennick is gonna be up for election
in 24.
in 24? Yeah, 'cause-
Just because of the way it's written, in the 4 years, I mean, your
Right,
term.
because Director Boyd Hodgkin, she will have been president in her term, 4-year term, right?
There's enough time for one of them, there's not enough time
Yes.
for both of them.
That's right, so,
Well, there is,
There
if
is.
Director Hernandez is not president
Well, that's what I meant.
next
Yeah,
year.
yes.
yeah.
There's
So,
time.
so is that, so, I guess what I'm getting at, it's, that goes against the tradition, that goes against the practice. And what I'm really asking is everyone okay with that? If it goes against the practice? If ordinance 216 does not change, is everyone okay with that?
Well, I would just say-
Legally, the policy would trump the practice,
Yeah.
because there is no policy for the rotation. So, but there is a policy that anyone, you have the opportunity to serve within your first term.
And-
So that policy would trump the practice.
And believe me, I've thought a lot about this, and that was the plan. Going in December of 2022, the staff report that you would have seen is that in order, if we didn't change the ordinance, I would say in order to be consistent and true to the ordinance, President Hernandez could not be the president. That would be your general manager's recommendation, that it would be between Director Boyd Hodgson and Director Pennick. And I would say, based on the rotation, Director Boyd Hodgson would have been before Director Pennick, for whatever the practice is worth at that point in time. But I would have informed you of that. But I would have highlighted to the board that there's a collision coming. It's just, we didn't need to resolve it last year. We do need to resolve it this year.
And I would just add, because this came up the last time with water, the majority of the board can change the policy at any time. So if we got to next year and you didn't want to do that, if there was a majority that didn't want to do it, they just changed the policy. So,
I guess that's what I'm suggesting. I'm generally supportive of that concept come, next December, but I have problems with that other part of the ordinance 216.
That definitely has to be addressed.
So saying 216 doesn't change is only in regard to this
To
aspect.
that aspect, that's the aspect that's on we're talking about
Right.
on the agenda.
Right.
The other aspect of it is, we've already agreed that we will look at that in the policy committee.
Yep.
So between now and the time that we're going through board reorg later on this year, if we have not changed the policy in such a way that either changed that language or whatnot, then that's what would happen. We'd have an election between Director Boyd Hodgson and Director Pennick. I do recommend, though, we take a full look at the
Yeah, 'cause
policy.
there's other things as well. I
For
think
sure.
people have concerns about. Okay.
So just to clarify, so you can change policy with the majority of the vote in a meeting?
Yeah, that's how ordinances come to be, is by a majority of the board.
Just by-
They can be undone by a majority of the.
And I think we're gonna find, I don't know about the water
But
agencies,
then you
but
change them the next time. You can change them, but then when do you comply? You change the policy this week, and then what happens if next week we change the policy again? I mean, we could be changing policies back and forth.
Absolutely.
That's why I suggested we go through a complete look at 216 before we make any
Yeah,
momentous
that's a good
decisions.
idea. That's a good idea.
Well, and that's oftentimes why when folks adopt policies, they adopt a requirement that any change to the policies is on a higher standard than majority. Because if you have 5 people that agree on it, and you say, well, it's gonna take a 2/3 vote to change this in the future, then you don't get those swings.
Exactly.
When there's,
Okay.
to simply
Thank you.
change by majority.
That seems like a better.
do we have language do we not have language that says it requires 4 votes?
I don't believe so.
I don't believe so.
I think the practice piece of it, I think we're gonna find when we do the benchmarking, that we're kind of alone on that. I think most agencies, the Olivia Hain president's been there for a long time, right?
It's a straight vote every year.
Yeah.
Yeah, so it's a
And
popularity
he's been there
contest.
for 20 years.
No.
No, it has been,
A couple of years, for sure.
And then,
I don't want that to happen here.
No, I totally get it. That's why I think, while I understand that the ordinance trumps the practice has been really good. This is an anomaly situation where we had 2 new board members join us that kind of threw the practice in a little bit of a haywire. But doesn't mean we need to throw it out completely, but we may have to adjust to accommodate, you know, our colleagues and the ordinance, so, but I don't think a lot of agencies, I mean, you know, Nathan Fletcher just got elected to his 2nd term as chair of the supervisors just yesterday, right? And so obviously they don't have a rotation.
Yeah, and this city mayor is kind of a little bit different thing, but it's, you pointed it out, that's, yeah, it's the vice mayor doesn't automatically become the mayor.
No, and nor does the like in San Marcos, when they appoint a vice mayor, they're appointed vice mayor until there's 3 people that say that they're no longer vice mayor. They don't rotate every year vice mayor.
They don't have a set.
No, it's just, they're there for as long, until three of the council members want to change it. So,
Does the mayor choose her vice mayor?
the mayor, much like our appointments, makes a recommendation, but it has to be approved by the
It's
majority.
not just through a rotation, it's
No.
right.
No,
Right,
it's
right,
3
right.
votes.
That's what I recommend, yeah.
Okay, so what's
so
What's
I'll
our
summarize what I'm hearing. We acknowledge that we don't need to resolve it tonight, and it sounds like we want to kick the whole thing back to the policy committee to look at the entirety of 216, not just this component of 216.
that's my desire.
I think we have to. I think one of our goals as a board was to do a review of our
Right.
ordinances and
I
policies.
think one of the goals we gave to our staff person was to
Yep.
one of the items in his performance review.
Yeah, and like I said, this was discussed at the policy committee meeting this Monday, and the decision was, let's focus on this piece, and then we'll go back and do the rest of it, but the board said, take it all at once, and message received.
Okay,
What's your thoughts on that?
Well, I think that this is an important conversation. I'm not sorry I brought it up. I'm not sorry I requested it to be on the agenda. I think it's an important conversation, in particular because it you know, it impacts me, but it also impacts Director Pennock.
Well, it
The
impacts me
plan-
as well.
Sure, that's correct, yes.
Didn't want you to forget that.
The idea was always that we were going to revisit the entire ordinance in the policy committee, but I felt like it was important to bring it to the agenda tonight so that we could have this conversation. This is a hard conversation. The longer we wait to resolve it, the harder it's going to get.
no, I agree.
And that was part of the reason why I asked for it to be on the agenda tonight, so we can have it, rather than 3 months from now, we're just now realizing it. I mean, we potentially could have avoided it all if we would have noticed that we were on a collision course before we voted.
Director Newman.
As I say, I agree, we should take a look at the ordinance. What I think also when the committee meets to look at it, the other thing, I don't know when it was, Mike, that you ran for city council, but those board members that are thinking of other offices and run, should they be successful, then we don't have a conflict. So there's some nuances to this that need to be addressed during the review that, to complete a revision of ordinance 219.
All right, any other discussion?
So it sounds like virtually, we'll discuss that at our next P3 meeting.
We will.
It's up to you two.
Via Zoom. All right.
All right. Moving on, that concludes our action items. We're on to reports with the general manager.
Thank you, President Elitharp. Just a few items. Looks like you all noticed, but the district seal has been refreshed. It used to be all gray, and I discussed it with Chris and said it'd be nice if it popped better. And he got with his team, and Lisa Urabi took it home, and she made it pop. I think it's a
good
lot
for her.
better, so
Great.
congratulations to
Yeah,
Lisa.
Very good.
Thanks. I didn't ask the board about that. I hope you give me that indulgence, but I think it represents us better than a gray on gray that nobody could see what
Did you notice it?
the seal was.
No? Good.
Just real quick, we were supposed to have received a proclamation from the city of San Marcos for our assistance with them on the hydration stations, but the city of San Marcos canceled their in-person meeting in January, whatever the date was. President Elitharp was ready to go and accept the proclamation, but they canceled, so it's just been delayed. We'll still get it, but they said they put it on the next agenda that they actually have in person, and I don't know when that will be. And the last item for me, our January 19th meeting is going to be canceled. There was a time that there was a conflict with a conference, so we had not been putting together a board packet. That conference has been canceled, but it's too late for us to put a board packet together. So our next meeting will be February 2nd, virtually.
Okay,
And that's all I have.
all right, thank you. District Legal Counsel.
Just a quick update. Last month, I told you about the tentative in the Driscoll case, and it's final. So
Good
the
news.
case has been dismissed without prejudice. We're working through, we got a settlement proposal, so that puts the end to that litigation.
Great.
Happy with that.
I actually have a question on the general manager's report. You said that the conference that was scheduled for the 19th, was that the Water Institute in Palm Springs?
Counsel.
Yeah,
There's a
Water
big-
Institute, San Antonio.
The Urban Water
Urban.
Institute is in February.
Oh, February 19th, yes, thank you.
And that one's on life support right now. They don't know if
Okay.
it's going to have a
Yep,
component.
okay.
If it's, I think the one on the February 19th will become all virtual, and that's a board meeting night for us too, so we have to figure out, I think it is. Yeah,
It is. It
it
is.
starts, and it'll be a conflict, so we'll have to figure out the meeting on February 16th, when we know more about CASA,
Okay.
or Urban Water Institute.
Was that it, Mr. Gilpin?
It is on fire.
Okay. Next is San Diego County Water Authority. Tomorrow, we have a special board meeting scheduled to do the AB 361 finding of continuing virtual board meetings. So we're doing that each month. And then the regularly scheduled board meeting is on January 27th. Next is Encino Wastewater Authority.
We have not had a board meeting, and won't have one till the end of the month.
Yeah, all of the meetings associated with Encina in December were pushed to like the first week before the holidays, and so we've already provided updates.
Okay. Next is standing committees. I think we had at least one. Would you like to report on that?
Sure. In the P3 committee, we talked about updating ordinance 216. That was a joke. We also, I'd like to report out for the benefit of the board, but especially Director Hernandez, who has been asking about the scholarship update. So we do have some news on that. And we are going to be bringing it before the full board for a vote, but I'll give you a preview. That's okay, right? I can give a preview? Okay. So it looks like we are going to be we are going to attempt to award $1,000 scholarships to students that will be beginning a matriculation in water or a water adjacent program. And we were looking at the high schools in San Marcos, the 4 high schools, San Marcos High School, Mission Hills, Foothills, as well as High Tech High. So kiddos that go to those schools, as well as Palomar College, Cal State San Marcos, and that's it, or am I missing one?
Yeah,
Am I missing one?
6 total, I think 4 high schools.
That's right, 6 total. So $1,000 scholarships for, for students going into either going elsewhere to study water, but also students that are at Palomar or CSU, students that are going to come into those schools, as well as students that may already be there, We do have several parameters that we can go into when the full board meets about it, that we can hash out if you're not comfortable with those. But the good news is, it looks like there's a bucket of money that we are proposing that we are awarding to students to really make a difference in the water industry.
Good deal.
Good, thank you.
And I think there was one more thing that I wanted to report on. In the P3 committee, we've talked about bringing forward a resolution in support of the City of San Marcos's single-use plastics ordinance. And we have worked with Chris and his team to develop a resolution that is supportive of that ordinance, but also is tailored to Vallecitos. So we'll be bringing that forward too,
Great,
in a subsequent meeting, in a future meeting.
thank you. Any other standing committees? I think that was it. Next is directors' reports on meetings, conferences, and seminars attended. Probably not much. Okay, other business, directors' comments on future agenda items. Director Hernandez?
I wonder if our next board meeting, we could get a date certain for the workshop. We've talked about it now for a couple of months. It'd be nice to get that done so we can show our ratepayers that we're not taking their money.
Yeah, and if I can just add, the original thought was to have it either in January or February, to get through the holidays, but one of the two people who have been attending our meetings, who requested, the one in particular who asked for a workshop, also said in her comments that she would prefer to have it in person. So that might delay it if we do it in person. But I'm open to doing it either way.
Well, no, I think you hit a very good point, Mike. I didn't remember that point. I think it needs to be done in person. There's going to be a lot of information. There's going to be a number of speakers, I'm sure, and trying to juggle that on a Zoom meeting is, I don't think, going to be fair to them.
Won't be as effective, I don't think.
Yeah, so. But at least we can set a date, and if it has to be modified because we're still in virtual, well, then it has to be modified.
I'm supportive of that. I had that in my notes also to set a date, and I agree with that approach. Let's see if we can set one and do our best guess as to when we might be meeting in person, and then we can modify it if we need to.
Okay. Any other comments? Seeing none, I think we're adjourned.
Okay.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Martin, for coming. Nice to
Yes.
see you. Happy New Year.
It's always good to see you too.